I put a poll up in my Instagram asking what film series I should review next. It was a close call, but Star Wars came out on top. So let's cut to the chase and talk about the film that changed filmmaking forever.
Star Wars.
First, just to get this out of the way, you're probably wondering why I'm not reviewing Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Well, I wanted to review each of these films in release order, so, just gotta get that out of the way before I start the review. And, oh yeah, by the way, for the rest of this review, I will be referring to this film as Star Wars, rather than Episode 4, A New Hope, because Star Wars was the way it was originally released. So, I will be referring to this film as that. Star Wars stars Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, Sir Alec Guinness, and David Prowse. And Star Wars is directed by George Lucas. This review will contain spoilers to Star Wars. So if you've never seen this film, I would highly recommend skipping to this annotation so you can still receive my final thoughts on this film. But if you have seen this film, then let's get on to the review. This film starts off with the iconic Star Wars opening crawl. And as soon as John Williams' score starts playing, I am already hooked. John Williams' score in this film might be the greatest movie score of all time. It is dramatic when it needs to be dramatic. It is emotional when it needs to be emotional. It is just breathtaking. It might be my all-time favorite movie score. This film starts off following a small rebel cruiser. You realize how small and insignificant it is in the following few seconds when you see the giant ship that the Empire is chasing this small cruiser down. In this shot alone, you already know the conflict and what is going on in this film. You know that the rebels are a small force compared to the enormous galactic empire. After that opening chase, you meet the two main droids, C-3PO and R2-D2, which might be the two best non-human characters in all of cinema, but I digress. I just love how you learn about the conflict even more through the conversation between these two droids. I mean, you learn about the Death Star plans and the conflict between the Empire and the Rebels. Between the conversation between two robots. That proves how great the writing is in this film. I've always adored this shot of C-3PO standing in front of the remains of this mysterious creature with John Williams' music playing in the background. I love how this shot adds so much mystery to this movie. Like, I always wonder what this creature actually looked like when it was alive, but there probably is an answer on Wikipedia answering all my questions, but I kind of prefer my questions to be unanswered because it brings a level of mystery, and this proves how expansive and how huge the Star Wars universe actually is. That simple little shot also conveys that this isn't any old desert. This isn't a desert you would find on Earth. You really truly feel like you're in a galaxy far, far away. I need to talk about the amazing set design of this film. Every single scene does not feel like it was shot on a set. Every scene feels like that you are on a different planet or that you are on a giant space station in the depths of space. And this was achieved in the 70s. I mean, movies back then didn't really have the greatest special effects. Yeah, you do have exceptions like films like Alien, but really I can't really think of many examples of sci-fi movies that have great special effects because everything feels like it was shot on a set, but everything here feels legit. It is honestly a miracle that this film is a masterpiece, because on the set, everything that went wrong did go wrong. So a bunch of stuff kept breaking. There was tons of stress on set. Actors started doubting George Lucas's ability to direct this film, and George Lucas started getting massive amounts of stress. And this film was set to flop, but, well, it didn't. It was one of the biggest movies of all time, and here we are now, like 9 movies later, still talking about this movie in 2020, 42 years later. The movie industry hasn't been the same since, and 40 years later, or potentially for the rest of time, people will keep talking about this film. Later on in this film, we meet our main protagonist, Luke Skywalker, who is played by Mark Hamill. Some people like to complain that Mark Hamill's performance is too whiny and very childish. Well, they are right, from a certain point of view. As this film goes on, Luke begins to mature. George Lucas was very inspired by the hero's journey character arc. I remember studying the hero's journey in middle school, and I actually wrote an essay about it. It's probably hot garbage, but, well, that's kind of where I got my inspiration, and that's when I really got into studying the character of Luke Skywalker. I can't talk about this film without at least mentioning the breathtaking binary sunset scene. Every YouTuber, every film YouTuber at that, has discussed the hell out of this scene, so there really isn't anything new to the table I can bring you, but I can at least give you my opinion on it. This film has what might be the finest piece of music that John Williams has ever composed in his career. This piece conveys so many emotions. It conveys every single emotion that Luke is feeling in this moment in the film. In this scene, Luke Skywalker is seeking out a grand adventure, but the problem is his call to action hasn't come yet. So here he is looking into the horizon, hoping that it'll come. This scene is just beautiful. There is no other adjective to describe it. Sir Alec Guinness's performance in this film is just magnificent, honestly. He's got the right amount of stoicism to him, like, even though his character is completely hopeless, you can tell that every ounce of him is just hoping to death that Luke will become what Obi-Wan wants him to be. One of my favorite scenes in this film is actually the scene in Obi-Wan's house. I mean, you learn so much from this scene. You're introduced to the lightsaber, you learn about the past of Darth Vader, well, sort of, well, some of it, and you learn about the Clone Wars. All this lore just packed into one fantastic scene. I also love the scene in Mos Eisley's cantina with Han, Luke, and Obi-Wan. I mean, Obi-Wan and Han's banter is rather underappreciated. Like, Han is just trying to convey that he's this big, tough smuggler, but Obi-Wan is just having none of it. It's so much fun. Honestly, there's not much of it, but the scenes where that banter is present, I just love every second of it. I am a little biased because those two are like my favorite Star Wars characters. The one thing I love about this film is it can be watched casually and it can be watched more analytically. You can peel back so many layers in this film that there's stuff that you discover on every single viewing, and there's always something I discover in every single viewing of this film. Honestly, I think anybody can enjoy this film. Casual film goers and more analytic film goers alike. Once our heroes go to the cantina in Mos Eisley, we meet my personal favorite Star Wars character, Han Solo. I adore the Han Solo character. I love his character arc throughout the original trilogy and even The Force Awakens. Harrison Ford's performance as Han Solo is just perfect, and the Han Solo character is, in my opinion, the most interesting character in Star Wars. I mean, he owns the fastest ship in the galaxy, he's best friends with a Wookiee, and he's overall just a badass. And in my opinion, Wookiees are the most badass and lovable creatures in the Star Wars universe. And yes, absolutely Han shot first. Han blew away Greedo before he even had the chance to fire his blaster. I don't care what people at Disney or what George Lucas has to say about this. Han shot first. Once our main ragtag group of heroes are assembled on the Millennium Falcon, I love how they banter. I mean, it adds a bit of conflict, but not too much conflict to distract from the main plot. It's just some entertainment to watch while the main plot is going on. I love how the characters are treated as characters. They have real emotions and real motivations. They're not just wooden statues just to drive the plot forward. The Death Star is an example of amazing practical effects. Not a single shot in this film does the Death Star look fake. 100% of the time, the Death Star looks like a real living, breathing space station in the deep depths of space. I love how grand the Death Star is in this film. You really truly believe that this giant space station has the power to destroy another planet. At this point in the film, you really truly believe how threatening the Empire actually is. Because, well, throughout the film, you believe that they were threatening, but now you know that they have the power to destroy another planet. It makes the task of our heroes defeating them seem much more impossible. Our heroes are clearly the underdogs in this story, and because of that, it becomes so much easier to root for them to win by the end. Once Luke rescues Leia, this is where Carrie Fisher's performance really shines. In my opinion, Princess Leia is my favorite Star Wars female protagonist. She has the right amount of depth, vulnerability, and feistiness to her. Once our three main heroes are finally assembled, Luke, Han, and Leia, their banter is just so entertaining and so much fun to watch. Han insulting Leia, Leia insulting Han, it's just so entertaining to watch. At this point in the film is where the action really steps up. From the garbage chute scene, which is a super suspenseful scene, and where Luke and Leia are just swinging across from door to door. This movie is just classic. And also another fantastic Easter egg from this movie, if you look closely, look towards the background, you can see one of the stormtroopers hit their heads. I know this isn't something new, this isn't something I discovered. Everyone on the internet is now practically talking about it, but once you notice it, you can't unsee it. Right. That small little tiny detail in this film of the stormtrooper hitting his head adds so much character to this film. Yes, some might call it a movie mistake, but stuff like this is fun to point out, in my opinion. And yes, it might just be a movie mistake, but it doesn't take away anything from the movie. Getting back on topic, the duel between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader might be considered lame to today's standards, but really it's an incredibly emotional scene, and it adds so much lore, so much history to the Star Wars universe. The dialogue between these two opens up so much Star Wars lore. It really dives deep into the history of this saga, and it's really our first introduction to the former friendship of Obi-Wan and the former Anakin Skywalker. By the end of the scene, Obi-Wan just realizes that he's wasting his time fighting Vader, and so he makes the ultimate sacrificing, dying a hero's death. This is such a satisfying conclusion to Obi-Wan's character arc throughout the Star Wars saga. After that, we enter the third act, the final action set piece of this film, the Battle of Yavin. And honestly, this scene is just breathtaking. Watching the TIE fighters dive into the trenches of the Death Star is just so much fun to watch, and it's just a beautifully shot scene. The cinematography in this film always manages to blow me away. Every single set piece, every single thing doesn't feel fake or artificial. You really truly feel like you're in a galaxy far, far away while watching this film. The tension really rises once you see Luke's Starfleet get completely decimated, and Luke's odds of destroying the Death Star get slimmer and slimmer and slimmer. Even though I've seen this movie hundreds of times, this moment in the film always manages to keep me on the edge of my seat. I always get goosebumps during this scene when Luke is in his X-Wing, Hope is about to die, and he receives a little message from Obi-Wan through the Force telling him to
use the Force, Luke. Let go, Luke.
This scene successfully conveys the theme of, even in the darkest of hours, always hold on to the spark of hope. Hearing Obi-Wan's voice was the exact spark of hope Luke needed at that moment. And to top things off, Han shows up just at the right minute. This completes Han's character arc in this film. Han starts off the film kind of a douchebag. I mean, he even said himself he only cares about the reward. But by the end of the film, he finally learns to step up and do the right thing, and this is the first step that he takes in becoming a hero rather than a scoundrel. Because of Han's assistance, the rebels are able to blow up the Death Star. Some may argue that a hole in the Death Star and that it only really takes one torpedo to blow the whole thing up is a plot hole. Yes, I agree. This is a plot hole, but honestly, this plot hole is swept under the rug because this film has such strong themes and strong characters. This film barely has any flaws, but there is one major issue that honestly doesn't really have anything to do with the original cut of this film, but you probably know what it is. It's George Lucas's alterations to the original cut of this film. The alterations George Lucas made to the original cut of this film aren't only pointless, but they tamper with film history. Yes, I understand that George Lucas wanted to finally complete his original vision for this film, but he could have just made a director's cut instead of messing with the original negatives and tampering the film forever, and there's no official release of the original cut of this film. But there is a solution to this problem. Harmy's Despecialized Edition finally gives Star Wars fans the opportunity to watch this Academy Award-winning film in full HD in the way this film was released in theaters. There's a fantastic video on how Harmy himself actually brought this project to life, how he managed to do the impossible, take what seemed to be lost forever and restore it in its former glory. I'll link Harmy's video in the description below. So, for review purposes of this film, I actually watched the Despecialized Edition, and I have these Blu-rays here of the original trilogy. It's on some website. They were pretty pricey. It was like $60 for all three of them, but it's honestly great that I have the original trilogy and the original despecialized theatrical versions of these films on Blu-ray, and I just love having these on my shelf. This has got to be my most prized possession in my Blu-ray collection. By the way, these are unofficial versions of the original trilogy, so if that bothers you, then just putting that out there. But this is the closest that we'll ever get, probably, to release of the original uncut versions of the original trilogy. The original Star Wars film, released in 1977, isn't only a great film, it is one of my all-time favorites. And that is why Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope gets an A+. I hope you enjoyed my review of Star Wars. If you liked this video, click the like button and comment below. And if you want more content like this, click the subscribe button. And if you want to be notified every time I drop a new video, ring that bell notification so you can be notified every time I drop a new video. And don't forget, like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for watching.